Hello everybody, welcome to this video about reported speech. Reported speech is used for talking about what somebody else said. It's very common used by journalists whenever they interview somebody. It is also called indirect speech. Look at this example. Let's imagine someone says, "I really like the food." If you didn't hear, you can ask, "What did he say?" Well, he said he really liked the food. This would be an example of reported speech. If you want to properly report what somebody else said, there are four cases or four situations. One of them, statements. For example, "I live in Mexico." The report would be, he said he lived in Mexico. Notice how I am changing from the present tense to the past tense. I'll explain that in a moment. An open question, "Where do you live?" The report would be, he asked where I lived. Closed questions, "Do you have a job?" The report would be, he asked if I had a job. And finally, imperatives. "Open the window." He told me to open the window. Now, as you can see, there are some modifications when you report. Let's analyze why they happen. Well, first we have the tenses. In reported speech, you have to change the original tense. For example, let's say that in the original sentence you have present. Well, in reported speech, you're gonna need to use past. All right? Let's say the original sentence has the past. Well, in the report, you're gonna need to use past perfect. And if the sentence is used in future with will, then the report will need to use would. Those are the three basic changes. And don't worry, present simple changes to past simple. Present progressive changes to past progressive. So it's easier to remember just present, past. Past tense, past perfect tense. Will, would. Now what happens if you already have a past perfect? Well, don't worry, it doesn't change. What happens if you have would? Don't worry, it doesn't change. But what happens if you have another model such as must? Well, in that case, there is a little change. Must changes to had to. Be careful, these changes don't apply to imperatives. Imperatives don't change the verbs like this. We'll see. I'll explain in a second why. Normally, when you report, there are a few verbs that help report properly. The most common verbs to report are say or tell. Like if I say something like, "I'm happy," the report can be, "He said he was happy," or "He told me he was happy." Those are the two most common reporting verbs. But what happens if you're asking a question? Well, if you're asking questions, then you need to use ask. Like, "What's your name?" He asked me what my name was. "Do you want to have lunch?" He asked me if I wanted to have lunch. So with questions, the most common is to use the verb ask. Now, what about imperatives? Well, for imperatives, it's interesting because you can use tell or you can use ask. Because when you're talking about requests, these two verbs are very useful. "Please open the window." He told me to open the window, or he asked me to open the window. Now, please be careful. Never, never, ever say "he said to me." It's either he said or he told me, but you never say "he said to me." Every time we teachers listen to this, we get all angry and frustrated. So let's go back to the first case, statements. So how does it work? We have a sentence such as, "We do a lot of exercise." This sentence is in present, so when you reported, you said, "They said they did a lot of exercise." You go from present to past. And of course, you change the person from we to they. Now, what about this one? "I found a better job." This sentence is in the past, so you need to use past perfect. He told me he had found a better job. What about open questions? First, let's take a look at the first one in present tense. "Where do you live?" He asked me where I lived. So as you can see, we need to get rid of the auxiliary. We don't use the auxiliary anymore because we're not asking a question anymore. We are reporting a question. Also, we change the verb from present to past and we omit the question mark. We don't need it anymore because we are reporting a question. We are not asking a question, we are reporting a question. Let's do another example. When did you arrive in town? He asked me when I had arrived in town. Past tense because we have the auxiliary did, so it has to go to the past perfect. Had arrived. And remember, we don't use the question mark. What about closed questions? Look at the first example. Excuse me, are you from Japan? He asked me if I was from Japan. With closed questions, we're gonna need if. What is a closed question, by the way? It is a question that only has two options, normally yes or no. Or, for example, are you single or married? There are two options, single or married. So whenever you have a question that is yes or no, A or B, black and white, that's a closed question, and you're gonna need if to help you report properly. Let's take a look at another example. Do you like action films? Well, he asked me if I liked action films. In both cases, the sentence is in the present and you have to change the verb to the past. And remember, you don't need the question mark anymore. The fourth case, imperatives, also called orders or requests. Look at the first one. Close the door. He asked me to close the door. So as you can see here, the verb doesn't go from present to past. It's imperative, close the door, and it goes to infinitive, to close the door. That's all the change for the imperatives. Another example, don't smoke in the room. She told me not to smoke in the room. This is a negative imperative, so instead of using don't, the auxiliary, you just use the negative not. She told me not to smoke in the room, and the reporting verbs for imperatives are ask or tell. Two notes before we go. Note number one, be careful with the pronouns. As you can see, if the original sentence says my brother, for example, my brother is an architect, when you report, well, the pronoun needs to change as well. He said his brother was an architect. If you say he said my brother was an architect, well, it's probably not my brother, the one who is an architect. It's probably the brother of the person who spoke. So you can say he said his brother or her brother was an architect. Another example, we sold our home. If they are speaking, then you need to say they said they had sold their home. Okay, you need to change the pronoun, careful there. Another note, be careful with time expressions, because time also changes when you report. Look at the number one. I watched a movie last night. That last night is probably not yesterday when you reported. Probably you are reporting this a few days later. So last night is not really last night anymore. So instead of saying that, you can say the night before. He said he had watched a movie the night before. Another example, I am reading a book now, but that now is probably not happening anymore by the time you report. So you need to say something like, he said he was reading a book in that moment, which is the now when he was reading. So as a summary, remember, statements. For example, I live in the city. He said he lived in the city, from present to past in this case. Open questions. Where do you work? She asked me where I worked. By auxiliary, by question mark, the verb goes to the past tense. Closed question. Do you like tacos? He asked me if I liked tacos. It's a closed question, so we use if. We go from present to past, and we omit the question mark. We use a period. An imperative. Call me back. She asked me to call her back. And remember, be careful with pronouns and time expressions when you report. Thank you for watching, and remember, practice makes perfect.